Hey, everybody, this is Leslie, and you're listening to The Interview with Leslie Heaney. My next guests are the most spectacular couple, Caroline Jones, singer-songwriter, female singer of the Zac Brown Band, and extremely successful solo artist with 4 albums. Her most recent single just dropped last week. It's called No Tellin'. And Nick, a world-class, successful professional sailor. These two fall in love, and we talk a lot about their incredible love story, and we talk about their amazing careers, and we talk about how they're balancing their family life and their priorities and what inspires them. I enjoyed every minute of my conversation with both of them. They're both physically gorgeous people, and they're also gorgeous on the inside too. So in all of my episodes, I think this is my 60th or so episode that I've released. This is one of my favorites, and I'm sure it'll be one of yours too. So here's Caroline Jones and Nick Dana. Caroline and Nick, for those that are watching and they're not just listening, I'm in front of two of, I would probably say, one of the most attractive couples that are walking planet Earth. Now,
she's
it's true. It's true, you two. But I'm so happy to see you, and I'm so grateful to you both for coming in to chat with me today. Caroline was just coming from a write-up, which I was asking her what that is because I didn't know. And I think it's so interesting to kind of get the behind the music, literally and figuratively, of how you go about songwriting.
Yeah, so when I'm not touring or recording, a typical week for me would consist of co-writing in Nashville. So I'm an artist, and I'll write with all different, there are thousands of songwriters in Nashville, hundreds who have publishing deals, and they're all vying for these single spots on country radio. So they're writing a few hundred songs a year, which means they're writing 4 or 5 days a week. And all the songwriters are writing with all the artists, trying to get cuts on their records. And so I'm in the process right now of writing a new album. And so I'm writing by myself, but I'm also writing with a lot of different new writers, some who I've written with before, who I love working with, and then some new ones. Like I said, I love to experiment and meet new people and find who I creatively jive with. But that is very normal in Nashville if you're an artist or a songwriter or a producer to be constantly collaborating. I mean, that is our day job.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we do all day.
So it would probably go both ways, right? You'll hear a song and you'll think like, gosh, that's a beautiful lyric. I want to find out who helped that artist write that song, if that artist did get help writing or collaborate with someone in writing that song. And then you probably are people sending you their work? Is it almost like?
Sometimes, but mostly actually, this is where the industry of Nashville, this is why Nashville has so many musician jobs, because there's publishers, there's song pluggers, there's managers, there's A&R people. So all of those people are saying, hey, you should write with X and X. You should write with Y. You know, you might really jive with this person lyrically or this person production-wise, or there's this new young guy who, you know, has these amazing tracks that he builds. And so you get set up a lot by word of mouth and through the industry, as well as through social media, as you just kind of alluded to.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's in music publishing, who I was mentioning to you a little bit earlier, and he was explaining you sort of always think, or at least I did prior to moving here, that Nashville's sort of primarily country music, but apparently kind of everybody's coming here to record, whether it's pop or R&B, and maybe it's because of what you're talking about, like the collaborative nature of what's happening with Nashville, with people on the ground.
And also just because in general, our world is so much more global now, and music is so much more global, and unfortunately there's not a lot of great studios left because music has gone so digital. So I think it's both. I think a lot of people are moving to Nashville, and so the genre spectrum is widening. And then I also think that Nashville is one of the last places where you can really make a record with live musicians and where there's a live music scene. You know, there used to be great live music scene, and there used to be great recording studios where you could cut a live record in LA and New York, and those things are dwindling a little bit. So Nashville is really the music city.
That is so interesting. I never thought about that, because when we first came, I remember walking through the airport, and there was just someone playing like at the coffee shop at the airport, and they sounded like Adele. I'm like, this is just like, there's so much talent here, and so many people performing live, like all over the place in places that you wouldn't expect. All right, so Nick, when Caroline is writing, do you ever like run things by him? I'm sure you probably
Actually,
do.
yeah, Nick is super. I really do. I really trust Nick's taste almost more than anyone's, with the exception of there's a few caveats of he's not a big pop music fan. So if one of my songs leans more pop and he doesn't like it, then I don't always trust that. But when it comes to lyrics,
by the way, I can be your person for that.
yeah,
That's
I know,
where
because I love
live.
pop melodies.
I sort of live in that space.
But I really value Nick's opinion musically on everything in life, but especially musically. And it really bothers me when Nick doesn't like something that I've done. Like, I'll go off and first of all, I'll get mad, but then I'll go off and change it a lot. But he has good ideas and he's very creative. He'll be humble and kind of undermine himself because he thinks of himself more as a shadow.
Oh,
He has really good ideas, and I've written songs with him before.
So pop is not your thing. Is country your thing?
yeah.
Yeah.
As I always say, I am the layman, listener that she has to aim things towards, because, when it's your business, they're so narrowly focused on every detail of a song. Whereas a person who's driving or working or, in a gym or something like that, I'd say maybe 60% of the time I'm not listening to the lyrics. You like a melody, you pick up on a couple lyrics in the chorus or something, and you're like, that song jives with me. So it's really hard when she'll put a huge amount of effort into a turning point in the song and how one thing balances off another and all that, and I just don't hear it. So it's, in some ways, I think being totally clueless in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He comes up with things I would never come up with.
Yeah, and I give her a perspective that,
right.
She's surrounded by talented artists and musicians. They're all hyper-focused in one side, but who's it all eventually catering to is the knuckleheads like me.
Is the audience.
And so it's like, maybe I can give a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But Nick is also not giving himself credit for the breadth and depth of music knowledge that he has in country, in rock, in classic rock, in grunge, and all of these. So he has all of these influences that I have to a certain degree, but there are genres of music and instrumentation that he can pick up on that, like he said, he frames in a way that I would never think of. And that's really helpful.
Well, it's so great to have him as your testing ground. Again, I'm available for pop consults, because you need to have, that's where it's ending up, right? It's almost like if you're in a professional kitchen or something, and everyone's very tuned into what the ingredients are. You have all these different people who are offering sound or offering lyrics or offering all of the kind of real professional input, and then you get
But then on a personal level too, he knows the bar of excellence that I want to set for myself. So that helps too, because he wants that to come across in the world too.
So you were mentioning that some of your songs are leaning a little bit pop. Country is sort of your main focus, right? And what were your kind of earlier influences?
I grew up not listening to country music at all. I grew up listening to classic rock, R&B, the divas of the 90s, like Mariah, Whitney, Celine, Barbra Streisand, ABBA. Like, that's what my mom loved. And then I was trained classically in opera and jazz. So I grew up listening to almost everything but country. And I fell in love with country when I came to Nashville at age 17. And I went to a show at a legendary singer-songwriter venue here called the Bluebird Cafe.
Yeah, of course.
And I was completely transfixed by these songwriters sitting in a room, capturing the room with just a guitar and their voice and their story. And I just I'd been into Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan and Jewel and some singer-songwriters, but I hadn't realized there was a whole genre of music and a whole town that's built around that experience of sitting in a room and listening to someone just sharing their story on guitar. That's what the Nashville songwriting community, and by extension, the whole Nashville music industry, is built on, is songwriters and musicians. And so once I realized that, I just fell in love with country music, and I went all the way back to the beginning, the Carter family in the late 30s and early 40s, and I went forward and just listened to the whole line of country artists and the whole tradition. And I felt like it was the missing piece of my artistry. And I just have wanted to be in Nashville ever since. And like everyone of my generation, we're all influenced by all kinds of genres. And the genre lines have been blurring for the past few decades.
Right.
Since, the advent of music digitization. So I have lots of different influences. I love pop music. I love rock music. Now I'm in the Zac Brown Band, so that's given me many more influences and textures and flavors to my music. But I do consider myself country because country is still the genre where songwriting and musicianship is at the forefront. And that's really important to me.
So when you said you're coming from Connecticut to Nashville, did you come to Nashville? You weren't here just sort of with your parents as a tourist. You were coming here as a musician.
Yeah, because at the time, my manager at the time was listening to the songs I was writing. And he said, your songs have a country style flair to them. And I said, really? I did country? That I was so surprised. But then when I came down here, I kind of found out what he was talking about. But he's the one who sent me down here originally.
So you're like a young girl in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. Did you start off singing or playing the guitar? Like how did you go from listening to Mariah Carey, right? And Whitney Houston to having a manager and ending up in the Bluebird Cafe? What was that path?
I started writing songs. I started singing when I was 9, singing lessons, and I'd been writing poems and stories since I could write and read. I mean, I always loved writing. That was my first love. And then when I was 10 or 11 and I'd been singing lessons and piano lessons, I realized I could put all those poems and stories to music. And once I realized that, I just never wanted to do anything else. I knew that was what I wanted to be and do, be a singer-songwriter. And so I think when I was around 16 or 17, I started going to this performing arts school in New York City called the Professional Children's School. And that's when I first got a manager and started recording my demos around New York City.
And he's like, it's time. It's like Taylor. He's like, it's time for you to go to Nashville, right? Is it sort of like the next step?
Yeah, I got it, kid.
So then yeah, I mean, you did. And
I don't know about that.
So you walked into that. And then at that point, were you just thinking like, this is where I want to stay because I really want to immerse myself in this creative community?
There was a part of me that wanted to do that, but there was also a part of me that recognized when I was 17, 18, and I started being put by my A&R with producers and writers, and I realized that I really didn't know who I was as an artist. I didn't have a strong artistic, like musical identity at that age because I was just figuring it out. And what can sometimes happen is that you kind of get put on this factory line of songwriters and producers who kind of write and mold your sound for you. And I just really wanted to learn how to produce. I really wanted to learn how to play my own instruments. I really wanted to book my own shows. I really wanted to write my own songs. And I think I just recognized that I had a long way to go. And so I actually went back to New York City and went to high school and college at NYU. And I started just my independent artist career. And I started booking myself around high schools and colleges in the Northeast, like literally just cold calling schools for hours a day. And then for the rest of the day, I would go to college. And then for the rest of the day, I would write songs. So I was really ambitious at that age and really, I mean, I still am, but I was very headstrong about doing it myself. And
so what happened to the manager? Was he like,
I ended up breaking ties with him. Yeah. And like I said, I cannot overstate at 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, like how headstrong I was and how determined I was to build my career my way and learn how to truly immerse myself in the crafts, not only in the crafts of songwriting and producing and singing, but also in the business side. Like I didn't have a manager or an agent till I was like 25 because I was just so determined to book my own shows. I mean, it was very inefficient, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot about who I wanted to be as an artist. I got rejected a lot. I got told no a lot. I played gigs for like 1 or 2 people. Like I said, it was very inefficient, but it built a lot of character in me, I think.
But it's also
and
so
like a blind
smart,
confidence.
I think for you to look at every aspect of the business, because while you're an artist and that's where your artistic drive and your creativity is coming from, at the end of the day, it's sort of like with Nick, being your audience, you're going to be out in the world as a musician, and the business side of it, you hear these terrible stories, right, of their writing or the publishing rights being sold to someone, or so understanding how it really works and driving that bus yourself is really smart.
Thank you. Well, I was also very stubborn.
So at some point you start meeting mentors, right? And and you had some huge mentors that are, obviously so prominent in the music business. Jimmy Buffett being one, and Kenny Chesney was one, and Trisha Yearwood. Was that also kind of organic, or did you do one of your cold calls where you're like, I need to meet you, Jimmy Buffett?
I don't think you could cold call Jimmy Buffett. No, I actually first was connected to Zac Brown.
Okay.
So Zac heard my first single on the highway, and we were connected through mutual friends. And Zac is super, if you know him, he's super supportive of new artists. He's a super generous, genuine soul, and he goes out of his way. He sticks his neck out all the time for new artists that he believes in. And so he said, why don't you come open 2 shows for me this summer?
What year is this, Caroline?
This was 2017.
Okay.
So I had spent, just fast forward from my days in New York City, I had gotten connected with my now longtime manager and co-producer Rick Wake, and he'd been managing me since 2014, 2015. And we made a record, my first record, Bare Feet, and the lead single off that was called Tough Guys. And that's the song that Zac heard and invited me to come and open 2 shows on his tour that summer. And I had never played a show that big, and I'd never been an opening act on a tour that significant. And
what was that like? What was the first concert that you?
The first concert that I played a bunch of shows, but they were all small shows that I'd booked and some very wild, sketchy festivals and things like that. But the first show I opened for Zac was in upstate New York. And I don't know, it's because the venue holds like 25,000 people, but they're not there for the opener, so probably, 5 or 8, 9,000 people, something like that.
Yeah, but the stadium size is sort of it still
I know.
feels,
well,
right?
also just for me, having been such a massive fan of the Zac Brown Band, like just those nerves alone, standing on a stage like that, and having never really played with a band because I primarily played acoustic. And so after I played those first 2 shows opening for him, I remember going home and thinking, I can't just go back to my normal life. Like, I belong out here. Like, what do I have to do to get on the rest of this tour?
On the stage with a band?
No, just that I belong on tour. Like, this is what I've been wanting to do for the past, 7, 8 years of my life. And I finally did it, and I can't just not do it now. And so I remember calling my manager and being like, what do I have to do to get on the rest of the Zac Brown tour? And I ended up opening that whole tour for them, and opened for them on and off the next few years before joining the band. But that opened the door for me. Like, that's how I got connected to Jimmy Buffett. And that opened the door for me to then be taken on tour by these other mentors and heroes of mine. And the career I have so far, I really owe to touring. I owe it to the people who have taken me on tour. Because that's how I've gotten the whatever success and fan base that I have now is because of them.
This episode is brought to you by the Scout Guide. If you're a woman who's looking to get back to work, but you want your own schedule, or you're ready for a career shift, maybe you have some marketing or sales experience, or you're just someone who really wants to help support the local businesses in your community, the Scout Guide franchise may be just the opportunity you're looking for. The Scout Guide is 100% women-founded. It was co-founded by my good friend Susie Matheson back in 2014, along with her partner Christy Ford. And the Scout Guide is a publishing franchise that supports, as I mentioned, small businesses through a network of city guides. They have over 90 locations right now with 90 women-owned franchises. These are women who have a particular location that they scout, and they feature in their own guide the local businesses in that particular area. And while they have great coverage all across the U.S., they're always looking to expand their franchise family. To find other women, maybe women like you, who are interested in building their own business while also supporting businesses in their communities. So if you're interested in learning more, I really encourage you, if you're thinking about going back to work, or you want to have your own business, you want to support your community, go to their website to learn more about becoming a franchisee of the Scout Guide. You can visit franchise.thescoutguide.com, or you can email them with questions at franchise@thescoutguide.com. And when you do, don't forget to mention Leslie and the interview with Leslie Heaney. Now back to our episode. what is it about touring that's so, is it just the energy of being and playing live in front of an audience? What did you find so compelling about it that you were like, I have to be doing this versus?
Well, it's the dream. I mean, the most fulfilling parts of my job for me are the very beginning and the very end. So the very beginning is like the spark of creativity that you get when you write a song. Like that is a high that can only be touched by a few other things in life, like that creative high. And then the very end of the process is sharing that with people and seeing how it moves them and inspires them and brings them together. And like now neuroscientists are learning like what actually goes on in people's brains when they go to a concert and listen to music.
Yeah.
Like it's very real. It's a spiritual experience.
Well,
for
it's also
people.
the shared experience,
Exactly.
right? I think that's part of the,
yeah. But even the chemicals that go off in our brains when we listen to music that we love. So it's the beginning of the process and the end of the process. But for me, touring means that you have a job in music. Like it's wonderful to make music and it's wonderful to put it on the radio, but like touring, playing a show is when it's real because people have paid to come see you play music. And like, for me, that's all I want. It long term, like if you can build a sustainable career in music where you can tour and make records for the rest of your life, like all the awards and radio and magazines and like that's all wonderful, but that's very fleeting in this industry. Whereas if you can play like Zac Brown Band will be able to play shows till he can't play them anymore.
Right.
Because he's built a touring fan base. And so that's what I've always wanted to build. That's what the heroes that I look up to have built. And that's what like touring and playing shows means to me.
And so now you're just mentioning that you're writing and working on your second or third album.
This will actually be my fourth album. Okay. This will be my fourth. I looked at you like you'll know.
Yeah.
I mean, Nick knows. Okay, so it's like 2017, you're singing with the Zac Brown Band. Where are you in 2017, Nick?
Yeah,
and how did you two... I mean, I feel like I know
where you were in
Nick
2017.
Since he was 2, so I feel like but I don't really remember. I don't know where you were in 2017.
I actually don't know where I was.
And or
it was right before you did your last Volvo.
But did you two? How did you two meet? I guess is what I'm really getting at. Like when did the person that's like the professional, incredible sailor meet the incredible, talented singer-songwriter?
Right at the start of COVID. I was living in...
That's a tough dating start, by the way. Literally,
it was a long shot.
Like May of 2020. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a real long shot. And there was the odds were definitely stacked against us because I was supposed to be moving to New Zealand. I mean, I was supposed to be in New Zealand by the time we met, but COVID delayed everything.
Were you in the audience? Were you at some audience?
No.
Okay.
But funny enough, funny enough, so I was living in Pensacola at the time.
When I opened for Kenny.
Yeah, so we went to a show in Orange Beach. I had no idea of Caroline, or maybe I did at this point. It's a long story, but I'm going to give you maybe the highlights.
I mean, that's what I'm here for, though.
Yeah,
I'm here for the long story.
There was a show that Kenny Chesney played that Caroline was opening for in Orange Beach, and we got out of work one night, and we all went to that show. And Caroline was sick that night and never played. When we did finally end up meeting, which we were connected by a mutual friend of ours, I told her I went to that show and she was, like I couldn't play that night because my voice was gone. And so it's kind of funny that it all ended up the way it did.
But maybe had you met that night, it might not have.
We wouldn't have. I was
sliding doors.
No, I was number 9,000 in the audience.
So your friend gives you Caroline's number, or he or she connects on text, or they're like, she's on tour, she's going to be where you are. How does this? And it's May, so we're all supposed to be.
You can back up maybe 6 months from this, and a friend of ours, we ran a shipyard in Rhode Island, and my mom would do a lot of the event stuff for it. She would organize these things, and they'd usually have one big party in the summer towards the end, and they were booking a band, and they were trying to figure out a band to do this. And our friend was a big Zac Brown fan and said, here's somebody that might kind of be in your range. She's been opening for Zac Brown for a while, and she'd be a great fit for this. And so my mom looked through a few videos and listened to it and really liked it and sent me a video and said, this is the kind of girl I see you marrying.
Stop it.
Isn't that crazy?
Stop
and my
it.
mom, I mean, my mom, she's not a
meddler.
she's not a meddler. She's never kind of meddled in my personal life.
Posey. That's really so. Now you got
So
that.
she
You're
sent
like,
that, and I said, beautiful girl, plays music, like sounds awesome, but have no idea how. And so I kind of stow that away in my mind. She keeps coming back to the forefront every couple months. My boss at the time was a huge Jimmy Buffett fan, and she was playing a benefit concert with him, and I was meeting with him in his office, and he had the benefit concert, and she walked on the screen, and I was like, I know that girl.
Stop it.
So signs here and there. And then finally, my sister, who is a meddler, kind of, I don't know if her and mom, I hadn't seen them. They continued to kind of conspire in the background, did some sleuthing and figured out that we had a mutual friend.
You know how you can do like
Jane.
Instagram mutual friends?
Yeah.
And they both are on the gram. Both of your sister and your brother are on the gram.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they saw that we had a mutual friend, our matchmaker.
Our fairy godmother.
Yeah, our fairy godmother, Jane White. So they were like, you got to try and do something about this. And, threw the challenge down almost. Anyways, I called Jane. Jane thought it was a great idea, but she knew how headstrong and intense Caroline was about her career and was like, it's a long shot, but I think you guys would be great together. And anyways, I tried several times.
Were you touring or
got
something?
iced.
No.
Yeah, she wasn't touring. She had really no excuse.
COVID. People used to try to set me up, and I was pretty closed-minded about it, honestly. Like, I didn't even, it wasn't even that I looked, like Jane sent me Nick's Facebook or whatever. Like, I never even looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think not that you, but just looking at, this is a very, you'd be like, this person's gorgeous, this person's gorgeous. I should at least go out on a date.
I just wasn't
so
in
finally
that
you just were worn down.
headspace.
You're like, I'm going to try. I'm going to do.
That's actually exactly what happened, because he said he was coming through where I was at the time.
Okay.
And I said, okay, well, I'll meet this person
I'm gonna
once.
offline, whether or not that was.
Yeah, it was a little detour, but luckily she's not good with geography. But
And I said, okay, well, I'll meet this person once so I can tell Jane I did it, and he can stop bothering me, and that'll be that. But as soon as we met, it was like meeting your best friend.
So
it wasn't
great.
like it wasn't.
Now, where were you? Where were you? Where did you meet?
We were in Florida. We were in Southern Florida.
But did you go to
we met on the beach because it was COVID. We couldn't go anywhere, so we just took a socially distanced walk. When we met, we went like this.
yeah,
Wow.
I had no idea what kind of germaphobe I was dealing.
Yeah, I'm
not going to
major
ask you personal
germaphobe.
questions of how you start dating. Who's in your pod? Can you?
No,
hold
well,
hands?
we were in Florida, in South Florida. So.
Oh, by the way, that is
we're-
true.
Yeah.
I remember going to visit.
And it was
friends
early.
I'm a
early
big
days.
germaphobe, so I was.
It was.
So you did the
but it was also so early that things hadn't really, constricted much at that point. But we met, and then I was supposed to be flying to New Zealand to move there for the next year
For the America's Cup.
For the America's Cup.
That campaign.
and
Yeah.
I was supposed to be leaving. I don't know. We were hanging out on the weekend, and I was supposed to be leaving on a Thursday because that was the flight that we were all going to be taking. And
Well,
then
we did get to date for a few weeks, and then he was supposed to go.
Yeah, but it was each Thursday
That's true.
that I was supposed to be leaving.
To
So
go
it
to
was
New
kind
Zealand.
of, and then that.
But we were
that
like
went
head
on.
over heels in love at that point.
Yeah.
Like it was very quick once we got to know each other.
So did you text your mother? Were you like
Yeah, I said
Right?
I'm
Yes.
going to meet her, and I think she was kind of beside herself that it all.
Well, I think
So
like
great.
3 weeks after we started dating, I went to meet his family in Charleston. So it was like really quick.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks after that, he was supposed to move to New Zealand.
So you're going now for the audience here, just to explain Nick's like incredible career in sailing. You had been sailing with a team. You were doing the Volvo ocean race. Is that right? So now you're going to New Zealand to sail what kind of boats for the America's Cup? Give us like a sense of the crew size. You got your captain. You're supposed to leave on a Thursday, and you tell them, I don't know what you told them. I can't leave right away.
No,
Following
it was the actual New Zealand
It
government
was just
wasn't letting us
COVID.
in.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, by the way, this is actually this is where COVID did give some gifts.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
we won COVID. Like I
Yes.
won COVID.
Yeah.
COVID was a great gift for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I joined a team called American Magic, which was competitor for the 2021
Oh yeah,
Cup.
sorry, I thought it was.
And we had done a lot of training. Our kind of winter training was in Pensacola, Florida. That's why we were living there. And then the whole team was basically going to move about a year in advance of the Cup, move down there. All the team, there's, I don't know, 150 members of the team.
Wow. Wait, explain to me this, sort of for people that don't know, people like me, how it kind of works.
Think of it like Formula One. It's just
because you're like people have to be on different shifts, right?
no,
on the boat?
no. This is
Or you
that
mean
that
like
was the offshore racing that I used to do. This was there's kind of the two worlds in it, in which you have the offshore racing, which is a lot like rally car, like off-road racing. It's endurance. It's like the Baja or something like that. I always put it into car terms because people
okay. So
understanding
offshore
it
too. So offshore has to do then with what you're saying is a little more about like distance and sort of stamina and
and you're going for days at a
right?
time. Whereas in the America's Cup, it's like Formula One. It's the exact same length. It's a 25-minute race.
I see. Okay.
And then you're sleeping in your bed that night.
So when people are putting together, I guess you could comparing it to like race car teams and things could be similar, but they're putting together their boat or their team. They're like, I want Nick Dana and I want Nick. Does everyone have you have your assigned parts of the boat, right? That you're in charge of?
Yeah, it's a relatively small world in that. And to be honest, I was brought on for a role that didn't end up even really happening. The boats are kind of so much on the bleeding edge of technology. Nobody knows how they're going to really work until we design and build them and then go sail them. And this was the first edition in which there was foiling monohulls. So, a single hull of a boat is actually on a foil, which is essentially, think of like an airplane wing that is underwater. And when the boat starts moving fast enough, the whole entire boat
comes out of the
water and you start going really fast. And so the speeds are all different. The engineering is completely different. Everything. It was a huge paradigm shift, especially for that 2021 Cup.
Okay, this is really interesting. I have tons of questions based on what you just said. Is this, I've always been sort of curious about, there are people in technology like Larry Ellison, for example, and Oracle as a team, right? I never connected the dots that part of that interest for on that end might actually be people that are interested in how exciting it is to create new technology in that space. Is every time it's a newer thing or, meaning you mentioned you were talking about that piece with the hull, and you have to get kind of acclimated to the new equipment when you get
100%. There had never been an edition where there was a foiling monohull before, and
it's called a foiling.
Yeah, where there was
monohull.
A foiling sailboat, a boat that comes out of
monohull means one.
Hull, okay.
Yeah. So
so it's like
so that's why I'm trying to help
one and hull. I know it. Okay, good.
Yeah, so a sailboat that comes out of the water, and can sail upwind and downwind completely out of the water, being held up by,
So what does that feel like being? Are you strapped on? I would be.
Me too.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like what he used to do is much scarier because you're thousands of miles away from land if something goes wrong.
Right. And those offshore races are you are tethered to something, right? So you don't fall off?
You try to as much as you can, but in order to go do things, sometimes you need to untether. Do you put
air tags on people? You're like, at night you're whatever, you're waiting like, wait, I just counted 30 people and there's only 28 to see anybody?
Yeah. I mean, it's tight. I mean, last race I did in that, it was 8 people. So you're very, very tight and you know what's going on. But yeah, I mean, bad things happen and you do your best to
when you mentioned the 150, that 150 isn't 150 on the boat. That 150 includes people that are like people looking at the engineering of the boat, making sure the boat's in great shape before you all get on to actually sail it.
Back to the Formula One analogy, it's the same as a pit crew.
Okay.
And then we have also a whole, room full of designers. We have a marketing team. We have management. We have, a full cooking staff. I mean, everything is this giant pod that is brought to the next location, and we're completely self-sufficient. And we set up there. It's very secretive. Each team keeps all of their secrets. Like
they
we
have
weren't
their
even
own
allowed
technology.
to show.
Right, because of the technology
Right.
piece.
So we weren't even like Caroline didn't even get to see the new boat until well into New Zealand. You know, they didn't even let wives and kids in. It's all sounds ridiculous because we're talking about sailing, but it's, you know, those guys like Larry Ellison
Yeah.
and our owners at the time and all that, it is something to get very competitive about, and technology usually wins.
And there's
The
a lot of
design
money on
wins
the
it.
line too, right?
Yes.
There's
them.
there's no real money, there's no cash prize. There's a lot of
Their
money to be
investment,
spent.
yeah.
And then, you know, they hope to recover some dollars, but it's not a money-making sport. It is becoming now more so with Larry Ellison's Sail GP, and he's created essentially a Formula One for it. But the America's Cup is an inherently very expensive, and you do not recover your money from it.
So in terms of sort of to give the full landscape, right, of the professional sailing space, and maybe it's too broad to do that, but you've got sort of these offshore races, and then America's Cup is, as you mentioned, shorter. So you're going to have different equipment. You might have a totally different
it's
sailor.
completely different boats, completely different sailors, everything. Yeah.
But you are able to do, in the offshore race, you can do the shorter America's Cup race. And is there any qualifier for the America's Cup? Meaning, do you have to have won other races prior to that, or it's just?
No, I mean, I can get into how crazy it really is, but essentially,
get into it. I mean, this is so interesting because I don't know. I don't know. You know,
I'll say the offshore world is what I was definitely better at, and I enjoyed a lot more. The America's Cup is something, if you grow up, you know, sailing and then move into professional sailing, it is the top of the sport in its own right, just as the Volvo Ocean Race or the Around the World Race is its own, you know, top of the sport. So you kind of always have that thing of, I want to do it. And if I get asked, I'm definitely doing it. It's like a, you know, you can't say no to that. It's it's amazing. And it's, you know, it's a 4-year job. So it's nice to be locked into a contract in which you're, you know, stable for 4 years, which most of professional sailing is really just, you are piecing things together all the time. And
okay, explain that to me. So it's 4 years because you're practicing.
You are building a team, then
it's almost
building
like the Olympics. It's sort of an Olympic level.
Yeah, and it's building a team, building a design group, then designing the boat, then building the boat, then trialing the boat and getting it ready, and then doing 2 months of sailing to race it, and hopefully you make it through to the America's Cup.
So when you say building the team, do you mean like having the just like you would for any other sport that has
an owner basically has, you know, he hires a skipper or a head, you know, general manager of the team, and then he goes.
And you're going like almost like you're looking to get the best sailors. But
it's just like any other professional sport.
Okay.
It's a small group of people. You're not really sending too many resumes out or anything like that. They know you're a known quantity. They thought I was going to be doing a certain role that ended up not happening. So I kind of shifted into, you know, more of a B role for, you know, another position. And the world is so small that once you've kind of made it to a high enough level, you can probably get your foot in most doors. But the America's Cup is probably the hardest.
So now are you still on the America's Cup thing?
So that was I'm probably one and done in the America's Cup. They changed a lot of what's required in the crew positions. And to be honest, I was, you know, kind of bottom of the heap for our team in 21. It turned to a much more physical role of endurance athlete that didn't necessarily even have to know how to sail.
Okay.
There was guys that were basically just generating hydraulic power in order to, you know, use the functions on the boat. And we were hiring Olympic athletes at that point. We were hiring kayakers.
Being able to like, actually, is it by pulling in the sail?
Yeah, there's an actual hydraulic mechanism that you grind with your arms, and then it in the last edition.
So you're like Dwayne the Rock Johnson or whoever is the
No, it's more like it's
person.
more like in the last one it moved to legs, so they have cyclists, and they were hiring all Olympic cyclists.
That is fascinating.
So,
because the boat does all the technology that humans used to have.
There's no more
figure
robots.
out. Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. And so how many of those because they're rotating, right? Is it almost like a relay race where you're like, you've done, if you're doing, well, the America's Cup's shorter, but if you're doing it longer offshore, is it like?
No. So then the
hour?
offshore is completely different.
It is. Okay.
That's
So you
all
don't have the
ropes.
leg.
That's
Okay.
all normal sailing. And
Which is sort of where your heart is.
Yeah,
And
more
while you've
classic.
been doing this, as you were doing this, you developed a love for photography, right? And film, right? Also?
I did this with Abu Dhabi. So I was there. I was the captain or the boat captain of the training boat out in Abu
Okay.
Dhabi in 2010, and I had an aim to sail on the boat. And then I blew up my knee, had a surgery. The general manager of the team was like, "I really like having you on board, though, and there's a role on board here in which we need to film and do photography as the race goes. There's one guy who's dedicated to that on board." And so I said, yeah, I'll figure it out. So I went around that race as the photographer and videographer
And
and terrible writer.
I was going to say, are these photographs now, these should be in the new house out in.
Should be in a museum.
In Brooklyn. Exactly.
We actually are framing. We're doing a picture wall
Really?
right now.
We don't have one sailing picture up.
What? Crack. That is not true. I actually said we need to take down some, like he has some world records and things. I'm like, it's too much sailing stuff, because it starts to look, your house starts to look nautical.
You guys are, I've been in the marriage game for 20, 25 years. And, there is that I'd say the first 7 years, it's like, when can I get rid of that one
And then you give up.
We're like, like things. I'm just going to put it in
we have
storage.
designated parts of our house where things like that can live.
Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
Man caves are great. Listen, I'm not trying to, but
No,
but I bet you those pictures are actually
No, I
pretty
love those
spectacular
kind of
because they're
pictures.
kind
I
of
do.
behind the,
There's some
the scenes.
really
You
amazing.
could come to our house and be the judge.
I'm going to,
But also, there's some really incredible sailing photographs of him in action that are in our house that are amazing.
I'm sure.
Shout out
sure.
Amory Ross.
Very handsome subject, obviously. So just take it back a little bit though, Nick. So, for listeners, I obviously know a bit about this, but from knowing you, but you grew up, as you mentioned, your family had the shipyard in Newport and are very, sort of grew up on the water.
Yeah.
But what is that, at what point beyond when you start like taking the lessons at Sail Newport or the Ida Lewis Yacht Club, how do you go from there to becoming like the professional sailor? You're sailing
There's
to
a
school
lot of,
and then...
I can give you mine, but there's 1,000 different ways into it. And I've always enjoyed that about sailing is so many people have so many different paths into it. And mine probably came more from a mechanical standpoint of being around the shipyard. I went to work on boats young and was kind of, cheap labor, but willing to do whatever.
Yeah.
And got a lot of exposure really young on bigger boats, which I think, a lot of the youth struggles to make that connection. And I was lucky with the shipyard that I was able to, walk the dock and be like, I'll come work for you guys or whatever. And was able to get my foot in the door early on
and just
sailing.
kind of observe what they're doing on these bigger boats.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Observe it from, the bilge bailing water. But
exactly. Being the cheap labor, right?
Yeah. But that got me, acclimated to a bigger platform of a boat to then work out a lot of stuff. So then by the time I'm in my late teens or early 20s, I'd done a lot of miles.
Right.
And miles really, especially in the offshore world, miles is everything. The more exposure you have, you can't really train for these really big around the world races. There's nothing, the longest blue water races that there are 5 days, 7 days maybe. So when you go, the first leg of the Volvo is 25 days. Wow. So, and that's a 9-month race around the world.
Yeah. Where does it go? So what are the stops? Are you stopping?
It changes,
and
but for the most part, it usually starts in the Med in Spain and then goes to Cape Town, South Africa. And then it'll either go up to the Middle East or it could go to India. I did one into India. It can go to Singapore. It can go to China.
And are you stopping there? Is it like the Navy shore leave?
Yep.
You get to
so
leave
you
for a
pull
couple
in
days
and you've just beaten the bag out of that boat and you've got a full shore team that's waiting there, which I did on my first one with Puma.
I see. And they're going to tune it up and do all
Yeah,
the
they
stuff.
fix it and you kind of recover for 2 weeks and then get back.
Recover.
Yeah, get back on the boat. And
Because you're probably not you're probably sleeping in like
yeah, you get to sleep
But I mean,
or like pass out. But
well, I mean, when they're actually on the water, they're doing in 4-hour shifts.
right. Okay.
So they're not sleeping a lot. But then when they get to these places and there's all these men in their mid-20s and 30s, they're just going nuts in whatever city they're in.
It's
for
like
a
shore
few
leave.
weeks.
It's like literally like shore leave.
Yeah.
I love this. I have some friends that are
10
single.
different.
I should tell them the Volvo race is getting.
You should.
there's a lot of trade-offs to having that really fun shore
This
leave,
is
though.
like a.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to you were going to move to New Zealand, right? COVID, thank God. I mean, this is again one of the gifts of COVID.
Yeah.
The other is Zoom, I think. You stay, right? You stay in Florida at that point, and you two
No,
were
we're
still
in.
dating.
I think we went in South Carolina, and then at that point, I had to leave. It was probably we'd been together, I don't know, 5 weeks or something like that, and then I moved to New Zealand, and I said, to Caroline, you're not touring. Do you want to move to New Zealand with me? And now that I know her, it blows my mind that she did it. At the time, that seemed just like a normal thing to me, but I wasn't, I don't know. I lived a very different life, and I got down there, and then she kind of, sorted out everything on her end for over the next 2 months, and then moved down, and joined me. And then we had a,
So you're training for the race there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so what happened to the music industry during this time? So
Right.
did
Well,
you
I'll
be able to
just
bring your
respond-
guitar and just,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
kind of self-contained that way, but just to respond to what he said, I'm a very 0 to 100 person. So I never really dated a lot. I was very career focused. So when I fell in love with Nick and moved to New Zealand, all my family and friends are like, what has happened to Caroline? Like she's done a 180 in life, but I was all in on
Jane White must have been so excited by this development. Yeah, it's so.
But Nick and I were all in pretty early with each other. And I was so in love with Nick and nothing was going on. I mean, all my tours had been canceled. And like I said, there was just nothing that could have stopped me. I was so in love with Nick that I just wanted to go to New Zealand and be with him. And I didn't know anyone there. It's across the entire world. And I was able to get a visa through his team because at that time they weren't letting people in they weren't letting tourists in because it was COVID. And you had to go over there and quarantine in a hotel room for 2 weeks. And I moved a couple months after he left for New Zealand. I moved there and we spent 8 months there.
So this is July of 2020 or sometime around
exactly.
then? And are you living in Auckland? Where are you?
Yeah.
We lived in Auckland.
Okay, so you're then after the quarantine, you move to an apartment and you've got the guitar out. I mean, obviously you're, as you said yourself, this is like the first time you've been madly in love
as soon
with
as
someone.
I got to New Zealand, I found a bluegrass band, like a local bluegrass band there that I started collaborating with. And I was in the process of making my second record, Antipodes. So I found a studio in Auckland and a couple engineers there, and we were able to long distance overdub from Nashville with my management and production team here.
Stop it. Now,
Because I
tell me
can't
what
go.
overdub
I mean, I was in
is.
love with Nick, but it's not like I can't work. Like I have to be
Right.
playing music wherever I am. But
Well, by the way, everybody had to adapt to the new
Right.
circumstances, right? So they figured out how to do it. So what is an overdub? You're singing.
So an
and then they put it over.
overdub is when you have basic tracking done on a record. So in this case, it was like bass drum, some guitars that
Okay.
we'd already done in Nashville. And overdub
I
is when
see.
you record other layers over that to finish your album. So for me, I do a lot of my own overdubs. So I'm playing guitars, banjos, keys, background vocals, lead vocals, and that's a whole other process of recording. That's like the part of the process that takes the longest. The initial tracking is pretty quick because you do it in Nashville with a bunch of session players.
Okay.
So then I took all those tracks to New Zealand and was able to finish my second record there while Nick was working.
This is so great that you were both able to keep pursuing your love.
But it was
and
like
your
having
careers.
a gap year when you're
Yeah.
30 too, because there was no COVID there and we were in love and it was like the twilight zone because we didn't know. So we didn't have the pressure, the influence of our family and friends and work and career and this and that. Like it really felt like we were suspended in time there in this amazing new
Yes.
place, So we were able to kind of create a foundation of our relationship that I think we both really treasure and value that didn't have a whole lot of influence from the outside world.
So you both have these incredible, thriving careers, and you have a son who's a toddler.
Yeah.
Are you like, I'm going on a race, I'm going on tour? Are you able to kind of, obviously you figured out how to manage your different schedules? Because both of your careers are sort of, when you're on, you're literally and figuratively, you're on. Like you're on stage or you're on deck, and you're like, how does this,
Well, I've ramped down a lot after the America's Cup because we were going to be, if I went back to doing what I did between the America's Cup and Volvo, you could end up, away from home 150, 200 days a year. So it wasn't really realistic. And, I had achieved a lot of the things that I really wanted to do. And Caroline's kind of on the launch pad with her career.
yeah.
And so I started, venturing out and doing a few other things and still do some sailing, and, just came back from a race now. And I'm lucky that, teams will still have me, and I can go do, these races in amazing places, and a lot of teams that I keep in touch with, I still get to kind of, jump in and out and fill in for people, or maybe even do a season, but nowhere near what I used to do.
But I love that this is sort of your time, right, Caroline? That does happen when you're in a partnership. It's just sort of, you do kind of, there are moments where it's terrific when one person gets to be able to kind of be there on the home front or be there more, and have the other person be, in a position where they're traveling or not as home as much.
I do feel confident that we would be able to make it work. I think Nick is, forgive me if I'm speaking for you, but he's also at a point in his life where he wants to explore some other entrepreneurial ventures and things like that. Because I do feel confident that if he still wanted to sail like he did, like we would make it work.
Right.
Because, Nick is so supportive of my career and my travel. I want to give that back to him in every possible way. And we're very supportive of each other's dreams, and we're excited for our son to grow up seeing us chase those. The reason that I married and had a family with Nick, because I never thought I would do either of those things, is because he believed we could do that and still live this life. And so, like, next week, we're going to take our son on the tour bus for the first time. And
it's so great. By the way, unsolicited advice.
Yeah, please.
Do that as, when they start school, it's so much harder to do that. And what incredible, time for you all to kind of be together and kind of expose him to just kind of such a unique life experience.
100%.
Yeah.
And all the kids that I know, especially from sailing families who have grown up traveling and seeing other cultures and being around different types of adults, especially seeing the microcosm of a tour or a sailing team. Like, these are groups of people, each of whom's contribution matters greatly to the final product. It's not just the person stepping on stage. It's not just the person at the helm of the boat. Like, it's the person, designing the boat, the person, forgive me, I don't know, I'm sailing metaphors. In my case, it's like the person hanging the lights, the person at catering, the person designing the set list, the person designing the video production. Like, all of those people make it go on every night. And if one of those people doesn't do their job, it doesn't, it's all about cooperation and teamwork. So for our kid to grow up seeing that is really valuable. And, Nick's support means the world to me. And growing up around music for Declan, I hope will mean the world to him. But I think, it's a beautiful thing. And our traveling is just part of our life. We're very lucky that we have a support network and resources to be able to make that happen. And I'm at a place like with the Zac Brown Band where they're all family men. Like, they're super supportive of me being able to bring my baby on the road, because a lot of musicians don't get to do that. Like, that's infinitely harder for a woman, if you're a mom, to be away from your baby than if you're not to minimize a dad's bond or dad's experience. But so I feel very lucky in that way, but we're excited.
So is the tour is imminent?
Yeah, it starts literally on Tuesday.
Stop it.
Yeah.
So how long is the tour? I did see that you're touring. I just didn't know this was sort of the launch of a longer tour.
Yeah, so we start on Tuesday and we're touring for 2 months this year. Then we have something very, very exciting at the end of the year that I can't talk about yet, but then we'll be gearing up for that.
I love that. We'll have to do a...
Please tell.
Next. No, okay. She can't. But you're all over the U.S. or is it a world tour?
This tour will be all over the U.S. And then actually we go to Australia at the end of this year.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. And then we have a very exciting end of year plans, but everyone will have to stay tuned for that.
I can't. We'll be. I mean, I'll be waiting with bated breath. You have to know this. Well, I can't wait to see you on tour. I can't wait to come see. I'm going to come see the sailing photos at the new house.
Be a short
At
tour.
Franklin. Nick and Caroline were so sweet. I was trying to get a studio closer to them in Brentwood, and they'll shower name nameless, but they double booked and canceled on us. I guess.
Do you want to shout them out?
I'm like, we really. So they were very kind enough to come. It's funny, Nashville is a terrific town, but at 4:30 on a Friday, the traffic is not great.
Yeah.
We're about to live it.
Yeah, you guys are really going to live it.
Do you mind if I add one more thing to
Of course.
the question that you posed? Because you asked about schedules. Nick and I also were both very lucky to come from really tight-knit families for whom family is a big priority. We keep each other accountable to have our priorities in check, and our family is our priority. And we're so lucky to also be able to prioritize the things that we love, that we call our job. But that makes the schedule really easy because when don't you agree that when you know your priorities, and like I said, when we're in a position to be able to, Nick is just as close to Declan as I am. So there's never a doubt or a fear of if Declan has to stay with Nick for a night or whatever, if I have a certain show. That is so wonderful because of how close they are. But I also think that the fact that we can take Declan with us on a lot of these things is a real blessing. And so that just naturally takes care of itself scheduling wise.
Yeah, but I think what you just said is really profound, that, when you know what your priorities are, scheduling is easier.
Yes.
I haven't really thought about that. I mean, I'm going to definitely cross off that hot yoga class that I don't go to as much as I should now, because that is sort of what complicates your schedule more,
especially as a
right?
woman,
Yeah,
because it becomes a superpower. Once you have a kid, you have this priority. So every hour that I spend away from him for my job, really matters. It has to be an important opportunity. It has to be something that moves my career forward. It has to be something that's creatively contributive. It matters so much more than it ever did. And so that is a really easy thing to prioritize in my mind now, because the time with him, like I said, every hour I spend away from him is time that I'm taking away from him. So I want it to matter and mean something in the world. And I think both of us are operating like that.
Well, he's so lucky to have you both as parents.
Oh.
And I can't wait. I'm going to be following the tour. I'm sure you're doing Nashville dates.
Yeah. If you want to come, I can get you tickets.
Oh.
Yeah.
Caroline, I'll take you up on that.
I know
Okay?
again.
I'm so grateful to you both for coming in. So
Thank you. Thanks
both.
for having us.
Thanks
This
so
was
much.
really great.
Aren't Caroline Jones and Nick Dana just delightful people? I mean, I learned so much from both of them and really enjoyed hearing all about their careers, but I most just really was impressed and inspired by how they support each other and prioritize each other and their family. I just think they're delightful people, and I really enjoyed my conversation with them. If you too enjoyed my conversation with them, please rate or review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. We love your reviews. We appreciate your reviews. And as you know, we usually release a new episode every Wednesday, but I'm taking a little bit of time off. So we'll be recycling some oldies but goodies, and I'll be back with some new episodes on May 7th. So until then, this is Leslie, and thank you all so much for joining the interview.